Hello, YouTube friends and antagonists. YouTube antagonists either. But I say hello to my YouTube friends. And I want to just comment on our current situation. And I'll just mention that I left a reply on In the Groove. I love In the Groove. Musician. He's got a terrific channel, gets very few views. He should get more views. I commented on his last video, and he was talking about his basically saying the buck stops with me, either on either side of the coin, taking responsibility for himself. And there was and he was basically agitating people that might consider the idea of he's claiming to be God or something like that. And there was a comment by someone who called himself something Rev, which refers to the rabbi. In the priests in the Jewish religion are referred to as Rev or Rab, and Rev Yahweh. Jesus was a rabbi, and so in his name he had the reference to the rabbi, and he said, "How dare you proclaim you are like God or you are God?" Okay, and I just I try to be very reasonable with this idea that he was objecting to someone among another human being identifying themselves in some form or other with the omnipotent being. And I said, well, even in scriptures, the rabbi commented and said that the kingdom of heaven is within. And obviously, it could easily be misinterpreted as sort of like saying, well, I am a god myself, and becoming narcissistic with it and all. But it was just simply to say that stop externalizing everything or understanding the world as an external reality. It is fundamentally an inner reality. And many people, swamis, gurus, everybody has talked about the idea that the inner world creates the outer world. So if you basically, I don't think we have a choice. The inner world is the outer world. So when you're following someone else's edicts, you're basically still representing your inner world by letting someone else that is external to you. It's a conundrum. It's a catch-22 kind of weird thing, but still, there is a lesson to be learned in life and to become masters of ourselves and at least have a semblance of some kind of change from when we're born to when we leave this existence, this reality, and or not existence, but this reality. And what happens, no one knows. But anyway, the point was, I commented, I said, stop externalizing the deity, the omnipotent being. It's something we all have within. And this is leading into the video I'm going to make today. Excellent video, 40-second In the Groove video, buck stops with me. So get the fuck out of my life. I will choose to be the person I am. Unfortunately, many people choose to be rather nasty because they don't do the inner work. They still think that they can get away with something, but the ultimate test that no one really knows is what happens as we become part of eternity. That the reality now we experience is a part of a greater existence, and eternity, I would imagine, I have an imaginative mind, I would say eternity is the next level of existence for if it's something that that a person is capable of internalizing in some form. And there are many ways of doing that. Some make paintings, some make music, some write poetry. The ethereal arts are actually part of connecting with eternity, which is why I like painting. So today, I'm going to talk. What is this ad remover? Horrible. Terrible. Anyway, today, I'm going to talk about the COVID thing as in a very severe context, and that is I've actually felt this entire shit show to be motivated. I was not personally part of the Second World War. I was born in 1952. I came after, but I have enough sense within myself to understand history and history repeating itself, and the stories that I was told by my parents, particularly my mother, and other people who experienced the war and the Nazis and the type of people that they were are actually now reappearing. Their ugly faces, even though they're covered in masks, that Nazi era is reappearing as far as in my estimation, the way I perceive the world. There is a similarity. Even though I wasn't there, I have enough information that allows me to conclude that we're going into a similar phase. Everything, I suppose, repeats, returns. We make the same mistake over and over if we don't deal with that inner world. The evil and goodness within needs to be understood. It's an internal thing. Anyway, my thought about this is the Nazis called it the final solution, and you can research what that meant to them. This is documented. This is not a fantasy. This is not for the deniers who say, well, X amount of people were murdered and it's not as bad as they say. Well, if you're willing to subject your own inner knowing, your own inner self to this kind of subterfuge, I feel sorry for you, because there is enough evidence that I feel within myself that this occurred on whatever level it did, 6 million, 50 million, 100 million. The numbers at a certain point become, I don't want to say irrelevant, but they become superfluous to the intent, to what is going on, the intent behind the Nazi vision of a final solution and what that meant as a human being. What does that mean? And generally speaking, the final solution was ultimately an attempt to eradicate any kind of free thought or autonomy that a person had over themselves, something that Inda Groove was referring to when he was saying, buck stops with me. And this is now, the COVID shit show is an attempt to extract anything left in a human being that is self-determining. So the element of fear and terror that is well known to us, one of the great events was the 9/11 terror show, which is Quantum of Conscious Matt did an excellent analysis of how none of the stuff makes sense, especially in terms of the few videos that exist that documented the event. This was obviously a lead-in to the COVID shit show that we're now experiencing. This fictitious, this entity that is supposed to be hidden in the crevices of hiddenness, and we can't eliminate it ever again. It'll show up in variants and omegas and deltas. They're going to go through the entire Greek alphabet to explain all the hidden nasty terrorist viruses that will be afflicting us, that will be threatening us with death. And death is a pandemic. Now, death is in fact something that is to be frowned on. It is not part of our existence in this real world. Somehow death has now been extrapolated as some extraordinary event that can happen from, I don't know, it's you can contract death, whatever, in whichever form, and the good thing is that the people that love us the most, it's not our family, it's not our friends, it's not some person that is taking care of you in the medical system. Well, they sort of, I guess they could be part of the people that love us the most. Our politicians and governments love us the most because they hate the fact we die. They don't want us to die. Meanwhile, you take the youngest ones, you teach them how to kill, and send them away 10,000 miles into a place, for example, Iraq or Afghanistan, and they get mutilated and murdered, and they murder as well, all because they love us. It's a love war. It's a love thing. It's a love thing. We're so loved. So now we're so loved, and we're going to be kept safe and protected by people who love us the most, in my opinion. And YouTube, if this ever sees the light of day, this video, this is my opinion. I am sharing some thoughts. And there are people out there that have the ability to distinguish whether I'm full of shit or whether actually they think there might be some reasonable ideas worth considering without Big Daddy who loves us, Big YouTube Daddy who loves us so much that who needs to make sure that people can only hear the love words that are considered to be sanctified. YouTube sanctifies all the love words. My words of love for my fellow human being cannot be accepted unless they're sanctified. So let's see if these love words of mine are sanctified. I insist they are love words. So I'm going to wrap this up. I could go on this. The final solution. COVID and the final solution. I think these two realities are really overlapping. And when you look at the way people have understood this, and really astute, intelligent people like Dr. Andy Kaufman, and there was an interview with him that I saw, and he articulated very clearly how this supposed beer virus has actually never been isolated. But nonetheless, it becomes the focus of our fear and horror, something that has been invented essentially in order to facilitate what I believe to be the final solution. Now, I'll go in, okay, here's how I see the final solution. It's not in the same way that people were rounded up during the Nazi era from about 1936, 37. It began with Kristallnacht when they were burning books and burning synagogues, and then it escalated to the more or less the beginning of the war. It became very, the Nazis became very empowered when they saw how successful their blitzkrieg and all that stuff was. They were hunting down the Jews and other degenerates they considered to be not worthwhile human beings, like George Bernard Shaw, the useless eaters, and all these eugenicists that populated the Nazi regime. So the final solution was fundamentally in place to have ultimate control. I suppose there was a lot of talk about a 1,000-year empire. You can't have a 1,000-year empire with autonomous beings and free thought. You have to eliminate that. And the attempt was, it didn't work. I'll say with parentheses, it didn't work, because I think all of the people instrumental in this whole philosophy were migrated to either the Soviet Union or America, or some of them, in paperclip. All those guys were employed and used in order to build the next level of success in this idea of a final solution, which is to extract, or rather to eliminate, autonomy in the population and any kind of free thought. And the way this is being perpetrated is through the beer virus, the Jabberwocky. I'm still sort of doing hobo talk here a little bit. I think this, will probably be eliminated, and I'll put it on I'll put it on BitChute. I should give an alert at the very beginning of this that this will be also on BitChute, because I suspect YouTube is not going to sanctify my love speech and eliminate the idea that this beer virus is in fact part of what I see very much like the Nazis employing a strategy called the final solution. So we are in the final solution in terms of creating an environment of mistrust and fear, where people begin to dislike each other for being poisonous to each other. The fact that we are not symptomatic or showing any kind of illness, which is rare, by the way, these days. Every person that I know is on some kind of medication, meaning they are ill. They actually are ill. But are they infectious? I've made a video on infectious disease. It's a theory. It's not a fact, but it's treated as a fact. So people are now under this infectious theory idea, threats. We are all terrorists to each other because we contain variants of whatever it is that is supposedly scourging through our china shop, the evidence of which is highly tendential. It is highly controversial in my mind, because if we, like the Mennonites said, the reason they don't have the COVID disease is because they don't have TV or radio. So you see, it makes a lot of sense not to be informed by the officialdom who love us so much. So I'm making a comparison to the Nazi era of the final solution, and this really feels to me, it really feels to me like the idea that the Nazis propagated amongst themselves. It came out, it was documented, to introduce what was to be the beginning of a 1,000-year empire based on the elimination and murder of a huge segment of the population. This was the final solution. And it's possible that whatever this current, in my opinion, current final solution may entail, it may in fact end up as a murdering mechanism. The Jabberwocky could possibly be a murdering mechanism, or it could also be an extraction of our souls in some form or other. This is speculation, because I'm not an epidemiologist. People who are actually capable of analyzing the real world and bacteria and so-called viruses, which ultimately are described by doctors I trust and believe, that are basically elimination of toxins. Viruses are toxins eliminated from our system, because we have millions of viruses in us. And those that manifest as disease are actually cleansing mechanisms in our body. But you can research this yourself. I am creating a context with this commentary suggesting that the Nazi era was in fact a preliminary, again, another long-term plan. It didn't succeed, or it did succeed. I'm not sure whether this was part of the idea in order to set us up down the road, whether it's 50 years or 200 years down the road. I am still convinced that the date, if history is to be believed, about 6,000 years ago, a character called Akhenaten separated the human race from that awareness within themselves of that godliness, I suppose. I like to think of it as a personal connection that we all have to, if you want to call it God or the omnipotent being, that if this reality exists within us, then Akhenaten was able to separate us from that by becoming the liaison to an external entity, which was not prior to him. There was an integrated sense of God within and out there, I suppose. Akhenaten stopped that. So is it a 6,000-year plan that is finally coming to fruition? Is it something that is manifesting itself, this final solution, as a medical tyranny that will ultimately end, or will, let me put it this way, it'll end when we decide for it to end. The human race says, enough with this bullshit. I'm finished with this shit show. That's how it's going to end. But this will not end, because it will bring in, if successful, that 1,000-year empire of thoughtlessness, mindlessness, automatons ruling the roost, kind of like those science fiction movies that they'd like to, they like putting out the Matrix type movies in order to inculcate us in a very subversive way. I find they're so insidious. If we don't have the ability to separate ourselves from the external world enough, this becomes part of the language that we understand, begin to understand, hence the extraordinary success, a stunning success, I would call it, a stunning success with the Jabberwocky and this entire COVID shit show. The final solution, in my opinion,